Liberal Currents presents Half the Answer with your hosts, Caitlin M. Green and Trent R. Nelson.
Happy days are here again. You know that understanding a question is half of an answer, and this is half the answer. Your host, Trent R. Nelson, and of course, Caitlin M. Green. You know what each of us does, writer and historian and philosopher and editor, and we of course both write and edit for Liberal Currents as well as this program. And Caitlin, she's a linguist, she's a writer, she's an editor, she's a mom. She is battling with the germ factory each and every week.
God, like you say happy days are here again, and yet here I am yet again, just a snot bucket. I'm a bucket of snot that's pretending to be a person. You're gonna have to edit out so many sniffles.
Oh, they'll be edited out. You won't even hear them. Might not even hear this. Well, Caitlin, such wonderful guests. They flow like water out of the faucet for us. Such great fun. Who have you brought with us today as you are battling illness? Seems good timing, no?
Yeah, right? I've brought a doctor. First, he's going to fix this problem, and then we're going to talk about the problems of this nation. What should I be doing? I'm drinking water. That's good, right? So I've got with me Dr. Jonathan Howard, a neurologist and psychiatrist at the Multiple Sclerosis Comprehensive Care Center at NYU Langone. I just realized that I've never said Langone out loud. Is that how you say it?
I think so. Though, to be honest with you, for the most part, home base to me is Bellevue Hospital. They're kind of brother and sister hospitals, but I'm more proud of Bellevue, to be honest with you.
And the author of books such as We Want Them Infected and Everyone Else is Lying to You, which, I don't know, to me, when I saw that book, it was like I breathed a sigh of relief because I was like, right. I needed someone to be looking at this. It is all about medical disinformation and the kinds of stories that we have been told about, especially COVID, but like just public health in general. And so, yeah, I wanted to bring you on to talk to us about kind of the story of COVID, the story of our public health, and kind of what changed and what didn't change in the lifespan of that illness. So, thank you for coming on. I'm so excited. We're living in a world where like all this kind of misinformation is now the story of our government. You know, I just went on to the CDC website, a page called Autism and Vaccines. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at this, John.
Oh, yeah.
But like at the very top of this questions and concerns page about autism and vaccines, the CDC website has 3 key bullet points. It says, 1, the claim vaccines do not cause autism is not an evidence-based claim because studies have not ruled out the possibility that infant vaccines cause autism. The second one says studies supporting a link have been ignored by health authorities. And the third one, HHS has launched a comprehensive assessment of the causes of autism, including investigations on plausible biologic mechanisms and potential causal links. What do you make of this?
It is both concerning and unsurprising. This is what Kennedy was always going to do. He is helping to make Dr. Andrew Wakefield's dreams a reality. He is probably soon going to publish a study, in quotes, proving that vaccines cause autism, and the CDC has been hiding the results until then. And we're going to be dealing with the consequences of this for decades to come. Measles is spreading, and pertussis is spreading, and the flu is spreading, and COVID is spreading. But this is going to be seen for generations to come, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I'm a mom to 2 small kids, right? And I managed to get all of us in my family vaccinated against COVID and flu this year, but it was really touch and go. Like I really wasn't sure if I was going to be able to make it happen. And I think a lot of people felt that way. And it's because of this hostility that our administration has towards vaccination, right? So I think that our audience probably does know who Andrew Wakefield is and what his legacy is, but I don't know, maybe we should do a really quick like summary.
For,
So who is
for our
that guy?
listeners who don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, so briefly, he was a British gastroenterologist who in 1995 started the myth that vaccines cause autism. He published a case series of, I think, 11 or 12 patients in the Lancet, claiming to find an association. That paper was later retracted, largely due to the investigative work of journalist Brian Deere, who found that Wakefield had committed essentially fraud and that he was trying to patent his own MMR vaccine. But it's a zombie myth that just won't die. And probably no topic has been, or very few topics have been studied as much as in medicine, as much as the non relationship between vaccines and autism.
Right.
But it's been a very dangerous myth. And unfortunately, via RFK Jr. has been catapulted to the front and center, as well as all of the doctors who legitimized Kennedy along the way.
Yeah.
This to me sounds like a concept that we have spoken about here on this program previously. Caitlin has highlighted it. The joke was, having a spider biologist like write your paper on how autism is caused by vaccines, right? We have a disconnect here because while, as you noted, sir, there are tons and tons of people working hard to show, that these are safe, that these can be effective, that they can help for all sorts of numerous issues. People want to believe the spider biologist's report, right? They want to believe the gastroenterologist's findings that it's
Right.
autism, right?
The spider biologist says there's only two genders, so I don't see why we wouldn't believe that because, he said so. Right. So this also comes back to this point that we've been making since episode 1, right? Since campus misinformation, which is that you can have as bad of an idea as you want, but if you tell people that your bad idea has been suppressed or has been like ignored by
Yeah.
the mainstream or whatever, then you can get so far. And it's like that appeal to free speech and heterodoxy, right, with big air quotes, like I've got this cool heterodox idea and the establishment won't let me tell you about it. Suddenly everybody's like, tell me more, please tell me more, I'm obsessed.
Right.
And that's right here, like point 2 of the CDC website, autism and vaccines, studies supporting a link have been ignored by health authorities. No, they haven't been ignored by health authorities, they've been debunked by them. It's a difference. There's a difference.
You're exactly right. Cheryl Hines, I think, went on maybe Tucker. That's RFK Jr.'s wife. Went on
Yeah, right.
Tucker Carlson the other day and said, you're just not allowed to ask questions about vaccines. When, of course, these questions have been asked, as they should have been. That's an appropriate thing to do, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been studied many times. People just don't like the answers.
Right.
But you're absolutely right that this idea of sort of fake suppression and I've been silenced and I've been censored is really very powerful. And I argue in the second book that it really helped catapult our current medical establishment to power. The head of the FDA, the head of the NIH. If you just Google their names and censorship into YouTube, you'll find countless videos of how silenced and how censored they've been. Of course, the people who were truly silenced the past 5 years are COVID's victims, people who were killed by the virus or crippled by it so that their voices aren't heard anymore. But these guys got famous by saying how silenced and how censored they were. And these are now people who are purging and censoring scientists. Canceling vast areas of research that they disagree with for political reasons. So it's all a giant Darvo. That's been the past 5 years is really what it's been.
Right. And it's no surprise that these guys are best friends with the people who were silenced for just asking questions about like race and IQ and or about Israel, like, oh, just asking questions about the Jews, for example. Like, oh yeah, okay, you're just asking questions and that's why you got silenced. It's not that you, I don't know, advocated for their extermination or decided that you should get to tell all of your students that certain races of people are genetically inferior than others. And everybody around you went, hang on, You're supposed to be teaching them true things.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, you're absolutely right that there's a lot of overlap, not just in the same sort of techniques, but actually in more formal ways. A man who's been gaining a lot of attention recently is a man by the name of Jeffrey Tucker. I don't know if that'll be sort of a name that's familiar to listeners. Maybe, maybe not. But and your previous guest, Walker Bragman, has done an amazing job of really exposing who this man is. Just in brief, he is a gentleman who previously worked for this very right-wing think tank called AIR. I forget exactly what it stands for, American Enterprise Economic Research Institute, something like that, which helped sponsor the Great Barrington Declaration, the idea, which I've written quite a bit about, that the best way to get rid of COVID was to spread COVID and to sort of mass infect everyone under age 60 and 70. And he is an overt pro-child labor advocate, a pro-tobacco advocate who previously had ties
Yes.
to the racist League of the South. And he's finally getting attention now because his Brownstone Institute is being recognized correctly as this sort of Maha hub, and he's a Maha power broker. So these ties run, these very ugly ties run very deep, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I have a intersecting question, and I wonder if you'll be able to help me with it. I hear a lot, not only about that the medical establishment suppresses ideas, but that it also cannot be trusted because it somehow is deriving like mass quantities of money from interests that just
The big
want.
pharma thing.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, in your view, how does that sort of intersect with the suppression angle? Are they related phenomena?
Yeah, so is medicine sort of suppressing things? I mean, so first of all, I don't want to come up, come here and be a big giant defender of big pharma. I think a
Sure.
lot of doctors, view them, a lot of people view them, correctly, kind of through two lenses, right? The main disease that I treat is multiple sclerosis, and I've seen that disease not cured, but radically transformed over the past 15 years
Right.
thanks to the efforts of big pharma. On the other hand, they also try to manipulate me by trying to get me to listen to branded talks or trying to get me to speak for them for large sums of money, something
Right.
I have refused to do. And there are other scandals. Obviously, the biggest one being sort of the opiate scandal and Purdue Pharmaceuticals, this sort of thing.
Right.
But the idea, I think, that doctors are suppressing the truth about vaccines, just isn't the case.
Right.
Vaccines actually save an enormous amount of money by keeping people safe and out of the hospital. The
Right.
cost of dealing with a child who's hospitalized with the measles can be tens of thousands of dollars, whereas the MMR vaccine, I don't know, costs under 100, something like that. And we're just not evil people, right? I mean,
Right.
like, I mean, if I, when I see, a patient who's in pain in some way, oh my God, my heart aches, right? I mean,
Of
I
course.
I want to end suffering, not promote it, so I can get an extra $50 in my pocket.
So
Right.
so both the suppression angle and the sort of big pharma angle, they both kind of converge. I feel like a lot of the followers of those two views into like extreme homeopathy. And and I'm wondering, why does everybody think that we should be drinking raw milk all of a sudden? What is all of this sort of, not even push back against new technology, but push back against like old technology? Like, we've been pasteurizing milk for decades. Louis Pasteur is looking down at us pretty pissed if he's, well, anyway.
Yeah, so this has been observed before. There's a term called crank magnetism, which is just this idea that if you believe one conspiracy theory, you're much more likely to believe multiple conspiracy theories, which makes a lot of sense. It's kind of funny in some ways. I am turning into one of those people in that we should be clear that who our current medical establishment is. It is RFK Jr. It is everyone working for him. They are the
Right.
medical establishment. We are on the outside. And they are currently suppressing miracle cures because they make more money by treating diseases than by preventing them, right? They are suppressing vaccines, not because they are
Yeah.
doctors who are working in the hospital, but a lot of these people are trial lawyers and
Hold
they,
on,
they,
hold
they
on.
want to litigate things.
Are you saying that they're doing the thing to the people that the people that believe them are saying that you're doing to them?
That's basically
Wow.
what I'm saying, right? I mean, that's why I used the phrase Darvo previously, which I guess
Mhm.
people are familiar with, but it's sort of a psychological technique where projection, basically, accuse the other side that of which you're guilty.
Mhm.
But this is a big sort of trope in the alt medicine world, alternative medicine world, that doctors are suppressing cures, like the cure for cancer, because we make more money treating diseases than by preventing them. But that's exactly what our current medical establishment under RFK Jr. is preparing to do. They are preparing to let a generation of Americans become sick, even though that will send a lot more children to the hospital. And I mean, I think it even gets a little bit darker than this. And this all started, I was about to say it started during COVID, but it's been a very old anti vaccine sort of technique.
Yeah.
Just the idea that the only people who are going to succumb to viruses are people who have underlying conditions, which is number one, not true. Number two, gross. I mean, Derek Barris of the Conspirituality podcast has labeled this soft eugenics.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
we're not putting yet, people in gas chambers, God forbid, but
No.
it's sort of let the virus rip through the population and the strong will survive. And that our current NIH director, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, recently announced a new pandemic plan, which was essentially that. It was essentially that. And we can get into
Let
that.
her rip. Yeah.
Essentially
Well,
that, yeah.
yeah, I think that attitude could be appropriately paraphrased as the people who will die are the people that it's okay to let die, which is
Yeah.
not something a society should believe about their people. Like you can't do that actually. People deserve to live. That's the thing about people.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And we heard a lot of this. Yeah, no, we heard a lot of this during COVID, especially our current FDA director, Dr. Marty McCary, would say falsely that no healthy children had died of COVID. And he gave the impression that it was that the only children who died of COVID were children who had leukemia and they were going to die on a Saturday when COVID killed them on a Friday. And so it's really not so bad because it was just, a kid who lost a day or a week of life. I mean, something like that, which again is
Insane.
false. It's gross. Death is not the only bad outcome from viruses. But he repeated that again falsely with regards to the two children thus far who have died of measles. And again, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya announced his new sort of pandemic plan, which was essentially that sick people should stop being sick. That was the plan.
Oh, okay. Just like think healthier thoughts. Like it feels like The Secret or something. It's like, just appealing to this sort of mind over matter thing that doesn't actually work.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and people have, especially David Gorski, sort of my mentor at the website Science Based Medicine, has very explicitly made that case with regards to The Secret. To be clear, some of what they're saying is true in that Jay Bhattacharya said that people should walk more and smoke less. So I'm not here to
Sure.
say he's wrong about that, but that's not a plan.
Right.
It's not as if you
Well,
can just
right.
tell. It's not as if he's hit on this brilliant idea. Hey, maybe we should try to, get people to stop smoking, especially given the
No
fact that
one's ever thought
RFK
of this
Jr.
before.
has cut a lot of the smoking prevention programs.
Right. Right.
Right. Yeah, you should yeah, well, and Jordan Peterson is right that you should clean your room, but like that doesn't mean that he's right about everything, right? Like, that's kind of how they get you a little bit is that they'll put in
Correct.
like very reasonable sounding stuff. So, okay, yeah, people should move their bodies, right? People should exercise their bodies. People should not smoke. People should eat fresh vegetables and fruits when they can. All true, all so true. However, they should also get vaccines, right? They should also like mask up if they're going to be in a crowd. Like these are things that will also help us be safe. Not just the walks.
Yeah.
When we took a lot of walks was during the very beginning of the pandemic, right? Like, I had a 6-month-old baby. We took so many neighborhood walks, just so many.
If walking was the cure for illness, then centuries worth of humankind would not have suffered and died again while eating very organically.
Yeah.
That's part of it, is that we have grown so much with medicine. I think it's one of these circumstances to where um, we're actually we're actually maybe a little too comfortable, which is a good thing. We shouldn't be dying. We shouldn't be sick. It's great that we have all of these medicines, but people don't recognize what life was like before smallpox had a vaccine, before it was eliminated. I mean, when you tell people the story that during the Cold War, somehow the two most powerful nations in the world combined forces to help eradicate an entire illness from the planet. I mean, our world is better because of
Mhm.
acts like this, and it's, I think, because we can't remember. We don't have enough people living that remember how much suffering existed. That we are on the way back towards suffering. I mean, beef tallow.
Yeah.
These are just like
The
common
fact
sense things.
the fact that there's a market for raw milk, that drives me
Ugh.
up the wall, right? To give your children, out of control. So, yeah, my neighborhood has like a Facebook group, and I just saw a post of somebody being like, "Hey, does anyone know where I can get raw milk?" And I just wanted to be like, it doesn't matter where you can get it. Don't get it. Like, pasteurize your milk.
Yeah, no, the current sort of number two guy at the FDA and a star of my writing, a disinformation doctor, Vinay Prasad, went on
Mhm.
Megyn Kelly's show back when he was auditioning to work for Kennedy, extolling the right of people to try raw milk, this sort of thing, saying the risks were very low. Meanwhile, now that he's in power, he's trying to limit people's access to vaccines. So essentially, he's saying, bodily autonomy for raw milk, not bodily autonomy for vaccines.
Right.
Look,
Let's make
I
it
will
hard.
push back on one thing. You said, Trent, that you said, Trent, that we've kind of lost memory of how bad things were, and there's definitely some truth to that. But one thing that COVID taught me, unfortunately, is that we have a big tolerance for letting people suffer and die needlessly. I think back during the Omicron wave, this was January 2022. This was the worst wave of the pandemic for children. About 6 children died every day that month, and just under 1,000 children were being sent to the hospital every single day during the
Terrible.
peak of that. This was January 14th or 15th, 2022. And people kind of shrugged and looked the other way, even though there was a safe and effective, not perfect, but vaccine that was available, at least to children over the age of 4 at that time. All of our current medical establishment was trying to dissuade its use and trying to still purposefully infect children. So we have shown
Yeah.
that we can tolerate this as a society, and think about everything that we've forgotten. The horrific scenes, not that we should dwell on these, but the horrific scenes of April and March 2020 here in New York City. I mean, those are totally forgotten.
Right.
It's as remembered, as some riot that occurred here in 1850. No one ever talks about it. Again, not that we should dwell on it, but these things fade from memory very quickly.
Yeah, to learn from it would have been so cool.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so again, yeah, another kind of anecdote, right? So 2022 was I had a kid who was 3. And so there was I guess she had just turned 4. So she was able to get a vaccine if I could find it. But I was driving all over town trying to find somewhere. And like I would have clinics advertise themselves as being like, we have the pediatric dose, we have the pediatric dose. I'd get there and they'd be like, actually, it didn't come in, or like, come back next month, and it'd be like, next month, what are you talking about? Finally, I got it at Costco. So thank you, Costco. But yeah, it was really, really tough to find for, and there were these like networks of parents of young children who were just desperate because it felt like there was no like easy path for us to make this happen. It felt like there wasn't really a lot of like institutional effort to help us to acquire this thing that like we just so desperately wanted, just so that we could like breathe a little when our kids went to preschool, you know.
Yeah.
Joe Biden admitted that he essentially forgot about the pandemic. I forgot exactly when he said that. Maybe at the end of 2021, something like that. And it's true that he never really made it a big push to take any mitigation measures regarding COVID, aside from the vaccine in 2021. But after that, he largely forgot about it.
Yeah. Well, you make an interesting point in I think everyone else is lying to you about like this sort of like move towards kind of a social reorganization that we started to do at the very onset of the pandemic, to say things like, oh, we have to value our essential workers, we have to protect each other, we have to like send money to people so that they can survive staying home from work, so that we can really like work together to like flatten the curve, right? We're all gonna make these sacrifices, the government's gonna support you. And then what happened was like things got a little too changey almost, where
Right.
like labor started to get a little like interested in advocating for their rights a little more stringently and or stridently, and suddenly it became like, oh, this is actually threatening, right? This is actually quite a problem for us.
So what you're saying is half true. I think you're referencing the part that you got wrong is I think you're referencing the wonderful introduction by Walker Bragman.
Oh,
As
you're
a
right, that's right.
Yeah. So no, he,
Previous
I'm so glad he wrote that because in my role, kind of as a doctor, I try to uh, stay as apolitical as possible, which is,
Right.
Yeah.
obviously not something that medicine can do. So I don't want to make it seem like medicine can stay apolitical. That's a crazy myth. But as much as I can, I try to just report the facts and kind of not take sides. But Walker Bragman, I'm so glad he made that point, and I'm so glad that you brought that up, because what spurned this great, resistance to COVID mitigation measures? I mean, probably a lot of things. There's no one single answer. I mean, none of us liked it. I sure didn't. I didn't enjoy lockdowns. I didn't
Right.
enjoy having my kids out of school. I didn't enjoy restaurants and theaters being closed. I went to a rock concert last night. I love that stuff. Um,
Yeah.
but what Walker Bragman was pointing out is that in the first few months of the pandemic, the government passed these sort of massive relief bills. They really came together and showed that when there's a will, when there's this, emergency that none of us have ever faced before, people can come together and cooperate to make everyone's life a little bit better. And there were a lot of forces who were opposed to that.
Right.
Some of the people whose names I've talked about, Jeffrey Tucker, for example, these sort of
Mhm.
right wing libertarians, of which I used to be. So I understand their psychology very well.
Been there.
I think. Um, and so there was this dramatic pushback against that. The problem is that they often framed it as coming from the left. So a lot of our current medical establishment, if you read their COVID output, they will say, "Oh, we just wanted poor children in schools.
Yeah.
We just wanted the
They're
working
losing
class."
opportunity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
right. So they woke washed the pandemic, and tried to make people on the left feel really guilty about COVID mitigations. We are locking children out of schools for years, and we are the ones who are ruining their futures. Again, all of these people were and still are happy to associate with an overt child labor advocate. I mean, you can go read his article from 2016, Let the Kids Work. There's
Yeah.
nothing subtle about this. So it's
Right.
entirely phony and entirely performative, but extremely effective.
Well, I cannot believe that you want to deprive children of their right for economic advancement like that. That's so wrong. You're keeping them out of the workforce, and it's actually really disadvantageous to poor children if you think about it.
Well, that's what Jeffrey Tucker says, that children should drop out of school and go work for Walmart and Chick-fil-A. Um,
Cool.
I want to be clear too that I don't think anyone thought school closures were this sort of good thing, and I don't want
Right.
to. I don't want to come across that way. But another technique that they used is they portrayed every mitigation measure as a choice. They implied that if we
Right.
were in charge, schools would have been open. Everything would have been just fine.
Right.
But you can examine their real world track record. So they helped run the show in Florida under Ron DeSantis, especially in 2021. And what happened? Well, the virus closed schools. So you can find
Yeah.
headlines from the Delta wave in Florida that schools closed in 5 Florida districts as they're drowning in COVID, or 15 educators die in Miami in a single week. So they got famous based on these accomplishments that were incredible and wonderful, but entirely imagined and hypothetical, all these things
Right.
they would have done. And now that they are in charge, they are failing to stop COVID. They are and measles and pertussis. So they're not able to do anything that they claimed they would have done. And again, Jay Bhattacharya released his new pandemic plan, in air quotes, which again was just to tell sick people to stop being sick. So now that
Right.
he's in charge, that's his plan.
Well,
Yeah.
earlier, sir, and I'm just curious because in my experience, I agree with the statement that there is certainly a higher standard for what we're willing to accept across the society, but I in my experience, I've seen this flare up insofar as, sure, we're frustrated at all of these like abstractions, right? That they're closing schools here or doing this here. But it really comes down to, is it affecting me? Is my kid sick yet? If my kid is healthy, then we can take that advice. Just take a walk and don't get sick, right? But as soon as my aunt gets sick, as soon as my uncle gets sick, well, then there's a problem because now it's impacting me. And I guess that's maybe a follow up from earlier. How do you think that really plays in our individual selfishness into all of this?
I mean, I think a good deal. If I hadn't worked at Bellevue Hospital throughout the pandemic, I mean, based on my family's experience, which is pure luck and knock on wood, and by the grace of
Right.
God go I, COVID was a nothing burger. It was a cold for me and my family. And most of us managed to avoid the virus, including myself, by some miracle, until after we were vaccinated. So that was very helpful. And I think a lot of the people who opposed COVID mitigation measures came from demographic groups that were not particularly hit hard by the virus. When you looked at all the patients who I saw dying during the first wave, this was largely people from Queens here in New York City. These were are the home health aides, the delivery men, the subway workers. Not the sort of fit, privileged part of society who, of course, at the time could avoid the virus pretty easily. And I've heard people say this. I don't know anyone who died of COVID, which I can also say about a lot of things. Based on that, gun violence isn't a problem. I don't know anyone who's been shot to death. Car accidents aren't a problem. I don't know anyone who in my family who's died of a car accident, which is, of course, a crazy way to think and just a reflection on how lucky and blissful my life has been thus
Right.
far. But people, of course, have a natural tendency to look around them and see what happened and base their perceptions of the world based on that. But this is the fact that the fact that mitigation measures were successful in 2020 in just preventing mass bodies piling up in the streets is now used as evidence that
Right.
they were no longer necessary.
Right. That is in itself ironic, right? That the
Of course.
thing that is saving us is the thing that we're blaming for like ruining like our Saturday night
It's
in
kind of the
May.
eternal curse of like epidemiology in general, right?
Right.
Is like if you do a really good job, everyone's going to think you were pointless.
Yeah, and there's tons of things like this. Here in downtown New York City now, they're building these flood walls. That we hope we never use. But if there's another hurricane, they will save us. But until then, they're kind of an eyesore and a very expensive $1 billion eyesore. So there are many things that we do to try to prevent bad things from happening. And when they are successful, I guess we would notice if they were successful during the flood. So maybe it's not the best example, but there are many things that if they are successful, we don't notice them because something bad didn't happen.
Right.
The Y2K bug thing, right? Like everybody went on going, oh, well, I guess that was just a myth. And it's like, no, people worked really hard to make that be okay.
No, that's a much better example. That's a much better example.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, you're making me think about, 2020 and 2021, and it was terrible. I do think having a 6-month-old was probably the best age to be a parent of a person because she like wasn't in school yet. So she didn't really miss any school. And we had to stop going to library story time. That was no fun. That was like our one big social activity, and the library stopped doing them. And you can't get a 6-month-old to watch story time on a computer. I tried. She was uninterested. Besides which, like, the whole point was for other babies to be there, right? Like, I can read her a story. But we made it through. And I think part of the framing that has really hurt us is this idea of like individual choice, right? Where it was like, oh, you can wear a mask if you want, that's fine. And like you can social distance if you want, but like no one should make you do it. And that feels like a real misunderstanding of how public health works, right? Like there have to actually be rules that people follow.
Yeah, I mean it's tricky because public health officials have to, number one, make rules, but if they make rules and people don't follow them, uh, then that's no good. And
Yeah. You have to
seeing
thread the needle.
one thing that I've come to realize through my writing and through my research into this is just that there were massive forces aligned against them at every step of the way, starting in March 2020. The misinformation started. And a lot of the destruction that we're seeing now is being justified based on the fact that public health did have some of these rules and some of these mandates. So I think it's tricky. Not if anyone's listening to this 100 years from now during a pandemic, how do you mandate things without inevitably triggering a backlash? And again, I want to be very explicit that Kennedy is saying, essentially, I am destroying the CDC today because of vaccine mandates, because of mask mandates. So all that stuff can backfire as well. So that's kind of a tricky psychology, public health topic about exactly what should be mandated and what shouldn't be. I guess I will say when it comes to vaccines, obviously the case to mandate them is strengthened by a vaccine that limits transmission. Our current vaccines, I don't know exactly what it is right now in November 2025, their ability to limit transmission. It's never been zero. I would always rather be in a room of 100 vaccinated people than 100 unvaccinated ones. But
Yeah.
our current medical establishment, again, the head of the NIH, the head of the FDA, all promised in the spring of 2021, right after vaccines came out, that they totally blocked transmission and would end the pandemic. They later said that this was a lie and that vaccine mandates were unethical, and they shed many, many, many more tears over someone who lost their job because of a vaccine mandate than someone who lost their life because of a vaccine that they were tricked into not taking.
Yeah.
So they provided the rationale for the vaccine mandates that they are now using as a justification to destroy public health completely. So, public health workers and people who make these policies have a very tough tightrope to walk. And I'm always
Yeah.
careful not to try to second guess them, because it's very easy to say, I would do this. But if you make a
Yeah.
mandate, no one follows it. Have you made the world a better place? So I don't know. I
What
don't
do
know
you
what the
do?
right answer is for this sort of thing.
Here I'm going to plug a Liberal Currents article that came out last week by Zeb Larson called Propaganda Rather Than Pandemic Policies Caused the War on Public Health, which kind of pushes back against that whole like backlash thing because, it's so easy to say, oh, well, we went too far on COVID mandates, right? And then people like reasonably kind of ping ponged in the other direction. And it's a really good article anyway. That like helps complicate that image, right?
It's a great article, and I want to say that I think my view is aligned with that.
Mm-hmm.
That the average citizen, or I don't know what the average citizen believes, but a lot of people were misled by the same propaganda forces that we're writing about, into believing again that the worst thing in the world was that they had to wear a mask on an airplane, uh,
Mm-hmm.
or that there was plexiglass at the grocery stores and this sort of
Right.
thing. That mitigation measures were this catastrophe, and this is something that I talk a lot about in my book about how people used. Our current medical establishment used this very emotional language. So if you listen to Martin Kulldorff, who you talked about with Walker Bragman, he's the current head of
Yeah.
the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices.
He's so hyperbolic.
Yeah, he would say that lockdowns were the biggest assault on the working class since segregation in the Vietnam War. So just this hyperbolic, emotional language designed to, enrage and inflame people. Meanwhile, when it comes to talking about COVID, he wrote articles called "The Triumph of Natural Immunity," speaking about it in this very positive, kind of masculine, tough way. It's a triumph. Or Marty McCary wrote a lot of articles, "The Power of Natural Immunity," essentially saying if you got the virus once, you would be immune for the rest of your life. So it was so powerful and such a triumph. So I think my point is in line with that article from Liberal Currents, which I really enjoyed. Just that there
Yay.
was this massive backlash, this massive propaganda backlash against even the slightest attempts to control COVID outside of maybe nursing homes.
Right. And like as you bring up, it draws on threads that predate COVID too, that there's kind of ways that they've taken advantage of existing kind of movements and ideas in order to create this big like wall of propaganda. So I would love to have you go into some of the examples of the kind of the language of this propaganda misinformation, because as you know, I am a linguist and I love language. And so, yeah, we talked about this like highly gendered, highly masculinized idea of triumph and power. I love that because it does bring in other strains of the current administration's way of talking about humanity and gender, right? Because it's all about like we want to get back to being like these, like, I feel like it kind of plays into why there's this appeal to things like the paleo diet or like CrossFit or whatever, like all these things that are just like so manly. Where it's like, if you eat pure, like just eat a raw bull testicle and then you'll know what it's really like to be a man, right? And it's like, and also deny the vaccines and like don't, what is it? It's seed oils, don't eat seed oils, don't be a soy boy. Like all of that stuff, I feel like is quite married in with this idea that like we should be living in this sort of like stripped down masculine way where we're not relying on things like public health to keep us alive. We're just relying on our own brute strength and bodily purity.
Yeah, and none of this is new.
No.
It did just predate the pandemic by a decade. It predated the pandemic by hundreds of years. If you go back and read anti-vaccine literature from the time of Edward Jenner, it's
Yeah.
actually not that different, and a lot of it isn't necessarily just masculine, but this idea that vaccination is somehow impure, and that you're polluting and you're contaminating your body with vaccines. And all of the same battles that we fought regarding COVID were fought in the 1918 pandemic. Ironically,
Mm-hmm.
during both pandemics, San Francisco seemed to be the hotbed of misinformation.
Yeah.
Both times, there's something called the San Francisco Anti-Mask League, this sort of thing. But in terms of the linguistics of the pandemic, I mean, yes, you're absolutely right, that I try to draw attention to the fact that people talked about COVID in the virus itself, or the disease itself, in a very, not a fear-mongering way, but the opposite, a calm-mongering way. And when they talked about mitigation measures, they talked about them as this catastrophe of epic proportions. And a lot of the people who I wrote about did the opposite of fear-mongering, calm-mongering. They talked about, we need to be calm and rational, which is, not a bad idea. That's fine. We need to put on our thinking caps and not panic and not freak out. But when it came time for any mitigation measure, panic, freak out. This is the worst thing ever. It's never going to end. And again, this all started in March 2020. But a lot of the doctors who I write about used identical language to try to minimize COVID and spread doubt about anyone who disagreed with them. For example, and again, pages of the book are devoted to this. They said anyone who disagreed with them was guilty of groupthink. In other words, they were the only ones who could think clearly and see the world free of bias. People like myself were just blinded by our hatred of Trump and this sort of thing. But they all use groupthink in the exact same way. Or they described any fear of the virus at any stage of the pandemic as doom and gloom, including during the worst part of the pandemic, January 2021, when 3,000 Americans were dying every single day. We have to stop this fear mongering, this doom and gloom. So
let's not treat this like it's an emergency.
So they all repeated the same phrases in unison to try to manipulate the public on an emotional level. And they succeeded. That's how we got to where we are in 2025. Combined, honestly, with the cowardice of my profession. I think doctors were braver running into the rooms of COVID patients 5.5 years ago than we were to standing up to misinformation and bad actors in our own ranks, until now that I don't want to say it's too late. I mean, it's not like the fight isn't over, but until
it's very acute.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. So what do you think is the reasoning behind that? Do you think it's like, I sense in the medical profession kind of a dedication to the idea of apolitical, thinking, where, you want to believe that like your job does not have that much to do with politics, but obviously public health has to. That's just like how things are. Do you think it's like that kind of ideology? Do you think it's something else? I know you said cowardice.
I think it's all of the above. I mean, yes, we want to maintain the illusion that we float above everything and that we operate on this, pure level, and some of that is true. When I give my lecture to the medical students on the anatomy of the peripheral nervous system, and I describe, the anatomy in the course of the radial nerve, that's an entirely apolitical talk. I think one thing that we already talked about is our current medical establishment was very good at weaponizing any attempts to contradict them, as you're trying to silence me, you're trying to censor me. I've also come to realize that a lot of the medical profession, and by the way, I don't want to make it seem like I was the only one. There were a bunch of us, many, many, many people at all levels of the medical profession, or who had nothing to do with the medical profession, who pushed back on misinformation. I've also come to realize, for better or for worse, that you had to be online in order to appreciate what was going on. If you weren't on, when I speak to doctors who weren't on Twitter, they were just clueless. They were totally blindsided by what happened. And when they heard, about Jay Bhattacharya being appointed to the NIH, they're like, oh, he'll be good. He's a Stanford professor. Or Marty McCary at the FDA. He's a Johns Hopkins surgeon. But they were clueless about how these people behaved online. They were also very good at code switching. So to one audience, they would sound very formal and polite and appropriate. To another audience, they would sound entirely different. So I think the medical profession kind of dropped the ball in policing our own. And we shouldn't have silenced and censored anyone, but we should have made them outcasts and pariahs, the same way anti-vaccine doctors were pariahs in the year 2015.
Right.
Yeah, and the way that they've tried to frame even that as like a violation of their freedom or as an attack or as mob, they love to talk about mobs, right? I have this whole like theory that I'm working on the side that's about the way that people talk about mob mentality and groupthink that's based on like pretty classist and racist misunderstandings of human psychology from the 1800s, where they'll just be like, the mobs, the woke mob, the woke Twitter mob, that stuff. It's a way to divert the conversation away from the fact that they're spreading misinformation right onto this other thing. Like any consequences for me, any investigation into my behavior, any kind of refusal to publish me in the really awesome journals that people clink their glasses about at the right dinner parties, like all of that stuff is an attack on me, and actually is like, it's like unconstitutional actually if you think about it.
Yeah. Even just yesterday, I think Dr. Oz gave a speech to the American Medical Association where he said that he and other members of our current medical establishment were censored and canceled during COVID, when in fact they met with presidents and lawmakers and Ron DeSantis. They were everywhere except with me in the hospital.
Right.
If there were COVID patients there, they weren't there. But they were everywhere else, which again is how they became famous. Scott Atlas, who served as Trump's COVID advisor, will say that he was silenced and canceled and censored, when in reality, the people who have truly been silenced, we don't know who they are because they've been silenced.
Yeah, we don't even know their names.
Exactly right.
This is all, I mean, throughout this conversation, I just keep being struck by like these moments where I want to yell about Plato. Like don't
but
nurse.
Trent, you always want to yell about Plato.
No, don't nurse the injury, right? Like a strong society is built on strong people, right? Like medicine just nurses the sick, and the sick we shouldn't be having develop because they're not what makes a strong society. And at the same time, each one of us is a poor little Socrates, right? Being canceled, being driven out by the mob that never understands us, that is always rapacious and ridiculous. Yes, I always do want to yell about Plato, but this time I feel like it was necessary.
You feel like it's necessary every time. Don't be silly.
And now that these guys have power, they are purging and firing dissenting scientists. So while they, in 2021, Martin Kulldorff, Scott Atlas, and Jay Bhattacharya met with Ron DeSantis, and they had a whole roundtable about a single video that was taken down from YouTube. One YouTube video. And they treated this as a catastrophe of epic proportions. But now, Jay Bhattacharya is fired many scientists who disagreed with him, and Martin Kulldorff rose to the head of the ACIP because his boss Kennedy purged the previous ACIP members. So they are happy to embrace cancel culture as long as they are the ones doing the canceling, and at a much more fundamental level, much more drastic, strong level than they were ever canceled or silenced. But they did a very good job of weaponizing their victimhood so that anyone who was perceived as disagreeing with them, was seen as this monstrous censor who was trying to stifle debate.
Right.
That's me. I stifled them. I canceled them because I did some tweets. So,
and they should have been more canceled. Again, they should have been,
not enough.
right?
Right. Right. Well, and
Not
like it's not good enough for them to have all this financial and professional success and to get a bunch of compliments from some people. It's like they need us all to tell them that they're special geniuses.
Cancel has just become a catchword for accountability, right? And
Yep.
all of these people should be held to account. I think that the term cancel, although we like to use it in jest and have fun with it, it does have this connotation that people don't rightly understand. No, this is
Mhm.
just like you've done something, you're held to account for it. This is like humaning 101, right?
Yep.
Everything has consequences, as do our actions, as do our words.
yeah.
There's a lovely paper called The Etymology of Cancel Culture, which goes into like the ways that the targets of cancel culture, which by which I mean celebrities, have used and misused the term in order to kind of bleach it of its meaning, right? Because like originally it was this idea that, you know, if an artist or a celebrity or somebody has done something that goes against the reasons why you're a fan of them in the first place, that you simply rescind your support of them, right? You stop buying their albums or you stop watching their movies or whatever. And like it's a democratic sort of autonomous behavior of the group of people who have basically no power on their own to say, actually, as a market, we are no longer involved with you. We're no longer
Right.
going to be propping you up so that you can continue to hurt us in this way. Right. And so what happens is obviously you're that guy, you know, you're Chris Brown or whoever, and you're like, I cannot believe that they would betray me like this. This is actually a crime. And then, like, you know, you can turn it into this thing of, oh, actually, we're going to make it synonymous with like witch hunts. We're going to make it synonymous with public shaming of random individuals like Justine Sacco, that kind of thing, right? That is not actually the same mechanism or has the same effect as what cancel culture, the culture part was added on actually by the tainters, but you know the cancellation was supposed to be, right? And so it's the same way that they weaponize the concept of free speech and censorship is they create this thing and they expand it out beyond its proper definition, and then that way they can use it to apply to make what's happening to them seem so much worse than it is, right? When what's happening to them is debunkings, disagreements, ostracism, perhaps, if they're unable to perform in the role that they're supposed to be occupying, then yeah, like they stop getting invited to the conferences and they stop getting published in the journals because they didn't do the job that's required of someone who would be invited to do those things.
But they're lucky that the ostracization that we in a modern society dole out is
Mhm.
is not actual ostracization. It's not. You still get to live and function in the society.
Right.
Nothing has changed other than that people don't find you marketable anymore because you said a dumb thing. You did a dumb
Yeah.
thing. You said a dumb
You can
thing.
still go to the grocery store and buy your food, but you cannot tell us what to think about the subject matter that you've shown you're unable to weigh in on.
Real ostracization would be the actual what it actually did, which is when you get like you have to leave. They like kick you out of the city. They kick you out of the place that you live. You gotta go. It's a Greek thing. You gotta go out and you and live outside of the community because the community
Mhm.
has determined that you're like not safe, or perhaps you have too much power, or perhaps like people like you too much. This is not that. These people have said or done bad
They're
things.
soft.
And they are soft. They are soft, Caitlin.
I think that's going to be their future. I think that this is not going to end well for them. I think that when this administration is out of power, in theory, who knows what's going to happen in 3 years? I mean, if they even last that long, I don't think that they're going to be welcomed back into the good graces of medicine, and they shouldn't be.
No.
So when I say that they should have been canceled, I'm speaking about everything that I'm sorry. When I say that they should have been canceled more, they shouldn't have been given invitations to
Right.
spread their misinformation. And it's worthwhile just to point out again that my opposition to them. And the reason that I say that isn't just that we had different pandemic philosophies, it's that they botched basic facts all the time. So at a point in the pandemic when COVID had killed about 120 children and the flu had killed 10, Jay Bhattacharya went on a podcast at the Journal of the American Medical Association and said the flu killed more children than COVID. So he was just getting basic facts wrong constantly, and someone who does that should not be given invitations and platforms and opportunities to further botch basic facts and confuse the American people, which he was an expert at doing. And I think they've kind of come to realize that that may be their fate. I don't think that they signed up to preside over the destruction of the American scientific enterprise, but they're along for the ride now.
Yeah, they're on it. They're on the train.
Yep.
Well, what's so funny, well, not funny, what's horrible is that, they are using those kind of olive branches that are handed to them by, like the JAMA or whatever, whoever you want to name these institutions that are like, well, in the name of intellectual diversity or in the spirit of like sunlight being the best disinfectant, we're going to bring this person on in order to like talk about their differences in, as you say, medical philosophy, right? And then what happens is people who are not terribly online, like the wonderful doctors in your profession, only hear that like they're involved in these organizations, they work for these prestigious institutions, whatever, and they don't hear about all the crank stuff. And so it actually helps launder them and helps bolster them and helps keep them able to continue securing those invitations to keep lying to us or being wrong or whatever it is that they're doing.
Yeah, if I was in a coma and I watched some of their videos, let's say I, fell asleep in January 2020 when COVID started, and I, woke up today and watched some of the videos that they made about how to control the pandemic and some of the mistakes that were made, I would say, oh boy, these guys are making a lot of sense. They're very persuasive. They're very good in front of cameras and, wearing suits and using titles and speaking the scientific jargon. And they mixed good advice with bad advice. Good advice meaning we have to protect old people in nursing homes. Bad advice being everyone else should go out and get COVID. So they were very persuasive that way.
Yeah. Well, alas, alas, that happened. All right, so I think we are going to have to wrap up in a minute because I have to go get my kid from preschool, speaking of public health. But is there anything else that you wanted to leave us with before we go?
No, thank you guys for doing all that you do. I've learned a lot from reading Liberal Currents, and it's great to see people saying, spreading the same message that I have, especially that article that you mentioned, about the propaganda.
Thank you, Zeb.
It's good to see that getting out there. And, in addition to my books, I write a weekly blog for science-based medicine. So anyone can go read that for free, so that I'm, can find me there. And thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, we will link to those things in the notes of the podcast so that you can find them easily. I want to thank you so much for coming on and for talking to us about the pandemic response and all of the different ways that we could have done better. And,
thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, guys.
I love this idea of like, you know what? People can see now what they're up to. I don't think it's going to last. I think you're right. Even very offline people now are like, Jay Bhattacharya, I don't think he's right. So that's great.
Everyone has seen The Emperor Has No Clothes. Finally.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully.
Yeah, it's pretty clear at this point. So thank you very, very much for your work on that front as well. And thanks for talking to us.
Thanks for listening to Half the Answer, presented by Liberal Currents. You can find Half the Answer anywhere you get your podcasts. Liberal Currents is an entirely listener and subscriber-funded publication, which includes programs like Half the Answer and Neon Liberalism. So, if you like what you've heard and wish to contribute, you may do so at liberalcurrents.com and through Patreon. And remember, understanding a question is half the answer.